Welcome back to the Well and Worthy Life podcast. Okay, today is really special for me because I have to tell you, I really believe she's probably one of my closest friends, and yet I've known her for such a short time. We are kindred spirits. We met, oh gosh, I'm not even sure, Marcy, how long ago did we meet? It was right around our birthdays in September. It was right before my birthday in September, I think.
It
That we
can't
met.
just be a year. It feels much longer.
It feels much longer, much longer. But Marcy Carroll is with me today, and we're going to talk about her new book, her latest book, her one and only book, right? As of right now.
Yeah.
And I'm holding it up. If you probably don't see that if you're just listening on the podcast, but if you're watching on YouTube, you see it. But it's called Notes from the Soul. And Marcy, thank you. Thank you so much for writing this book, number one, and number two, joining me here on the podcast today to talk about it.
Oh, thank you, Deanna. I have chills. I love being here with you. So thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Well, I remember when we first met and you first told me, I don't know if it was in our first, I feel it was in our first conversation, our first long walk that we went on together. And you told me about this book. And you were really in the midst of writing it and fleshing it out still and working on it. And I really didn't know what to expect, to be honest with you. But you wrote this book, and you have never written a book before, right?
I've never written a book. No.
So tell us a little bit about what you did before. I feel like this is almost like a reinvention of yourself a little bit, right?
For sure. Yes. I've definitely never written a book before. And you're right. We were going on a long walk here and in beautiful nature. And it was interesting because I was sharing with you, I'm kind of writing this little story. I didn't call it a book, I don't think. And I'm just sort of sharing different things that I've learned on my spiritual journey, and really wasn't saying very much about it to you and to others close to me. So I didn't really know what was to become of it, having never written a book before. I didn't even know if I was doing it right or what was even happening. But initially, when I first got down here before the pandemic, before everything shut down.
Okay, so let's go back and tell everybody a little bit about your background and then what you did to create the space to write this book.
Okay, sure. So if anyone had told me 6 years ago in 2017 that I would have lost my father, and in 2018, I would have transitioned out of a business that I had worked in for 20 years. In 2019, I would have moved to an entirely different state where I didn't know anyone. And then 3 months later, the world would shut down for a pandemic. I would have said, I'm not signing up for that. There's no way I can handle that. But that is indeed what happened. So my need for space happened after I had lost my father and I had transitioned out of our family business. We had worked together for 20 years. So I was crushed, and I had an opportunity to transition away from the business world. I had had a lot of things, as most of us do, on our plates. And so I guess perhaps I had a moment to breathe for a split second. And I remember it was almost like a wake-up call where I was thinking, what am I doing here with my life? Like, where am I? Who am I? And what am I doing? And so I felt this need for space. I couldn't really explain it any more than it was just this longing for space. So much so that I ended up in therapy trying to figure out, what does that mean? And that ended up having some great books pointing me in different directions. But I won't go rambling on. I'll let you.
No, I love that, because I think that there's a lot of times in our life that we feel this nudge of something, whether it be space or silence or whatever, and we don't really listen to it. But you actually had the opportunity, and I say opportunity because, it's not very often you find yourself in a space where you can really go after what and really spend some time like you did. Don't you
Right.
think?
Oh, for sure. And it was not easy. So
Mhm.
one would think, oh, okay, you have this need for space, then go find it. But it required me really leaving everything I knew behind, including a relationship that I had been in, and sort of venturing out into complete unknown without a destination, really. So
Which that in itself is super scary, and most people will never do that because even if they're not in the right relationship, it's better to know the known than to know the unknown, right?
definitely.
Mhm.
And that's what I was feeling, this tug from my head and my heart. You know, my head was like, why would you want to move out of a relationship, live on your own, be somewhere where you don't know anyone? You have two big dogs. You know, you're leaving everyone behind. You just lost your father. You're out of a, you're lost your business. Like all of these different things happening. So the head was like, oh, that's not a very good idea. Sure, just go out to get this space, whatever that means. And then you have no destination, but go for it. But yet the heart, like when you feel that, as you said, nudge, that it just feels like I should be going in that direction, even though logically it doesn't make sense because it's completely unknown territory. It was sort of this tug of the head and the heart, and eventually the heart took over, and I was on a journey. I had no idea where I was even going day by day.
But you talked about in the book how you've operated most of your life from your head, not your heart, not from your feelings. It's funny as I read that, I was like, I've done the opposite.
Well, that's a good thing, I think,
Oh,
because
I don't know. Some would say not so much. So,
I don't know. I think because the head was always like a lot of, well, what if? So I was in the business world. I had taken care of my father for 6 years before he passed away. You know, so the head was kind of like keeping me back at times in a good way, but in other times I wasn't taking a lot of risks because I was more, you know, operating more or less out of like a fear-based mentality. I'm not saying that all thinking and thoughts or movement from the head or fear-based, but mine
right,
were.
right, right. Okay, you moved to South Carolina and you didn't know anybody, but you jumped in and you met people,
Oh my
right?
gosh. Okay, so this was so funny. So I moved in November of 2019. The world shut down in like January of 2020. So I'm down in South Carolina. I knew nobody. In fact, I rented a little tiny cottage on people's property. I didn't even know where it was. I was trying to zoom in to see if it was safe or private. You know, I had no idea. And it ended up in retrospect completely being like the nicest, one of the nicest and friendliest and social families in the community. But so I moved down, I leave everything behind, the relationship behind, all of my belongings behind. I mean, I fit everything into like a suburban, more or less, with two dogs. And then I show up. My son drove with me, my older son, and I got down here and I was like, what the heck? Like, now I'm really thinking I've lost it. Like, am I in the middle of a midlife crisis or what am I doing, you know, in a place where I've never done anything like that before in my life. So it
Wow.
was pretty scary. Again, like if I were to have been asked in advance or told like, hey, this is what's going to happen with your life, I would have said, oh, no, thank you. But
Yeah.
somehow I ended up there or here.
So were there moments, because I mean, I just have to believe, I know you went on a spiritual journey, which I love that, which I think that would help. But I feel like that during this time, because even in COVID, I was locked down in my house. I kind of felt lonely and I had my husband here with me. So were there times where you felt lonely and sad? And how did you deal with all of that during that time?
Oh, oh my gosh, my heart was crushed. I felt so lonely, so alone, and I was. I mean, I
Mhm.
had nobody in this cottage other than my 2 dogs, a few suitcases. I had brought only memories that I really cared about, photos and photo albums from my sons and other family members and friends over the years. And I cried quite a bit in the beginning. I mean, I just remember just like in tears, like, what, I'm all alone. What have I done? This is a horrible mistake. Why am I even here? And then I had like a crisis, an identity crisis of who am I? Like, I am still a mother, but that role has shifted. You know, my kids are living
Mm.
independently and happy. I'm no longer a businesswoman, which I was most of my life. And as I mentioned, I had taken care of my father for 6 years and he had passed away. And I was like, no idea who I was, what I
Mm.
was doing all alone. And it was interesting because, as I mentioned, the people who I rented from right on that their property were very social. And so the easy path for me would have been to jump right into an overload of social activities. But I resisted that. Now that I look back, at the time I didn't realize it, but I resisted it and I knew I'm here. I have some soul searching to do and I have to figure some things out. So the harder path was definitely to sit in the cottage and, you know, try to figure out some time alone, try to tune into myself, listen to some of the voices in my head, which were not very nice to myself.
Mm.
But yes, to answer your question, Deanna, it was so lonely. And
Mhm.
I had a lot of nights where I was just crying quite a bit.
And I love what you just said, that you could have just jumped into social and could have ignored that part, but you didn't. You knew it was important for you to sit in that. And oh, that's one thing that I struggle with myself. I mean, even after my mother died, there were things to do, things to do. And so I didn't want to sit in the grief and I didn't want to be all sad and everything. So I just kept busy. But if you don't sit in whatever, then it will catch up with you. So one way or
Right,
another.
right. It definitely will. And I also realized, you know, I was on this journey and had really left everything behind. So I needed to tune in with myself and, as you mentioned, grieve over some of those losses. I mean, I had never really grieved the loss of my mom who passed away in 2010. I
Mhm.
was just like you said, just going to the next thing and the next thing and always just constantly moving. And so to come to a new place and not jump into the social things happening in the community was very hard. And they all thought I was a hermit and I was just, you know, I was, I guess. I mean, it's not that I didn't do anything, but I didn't do that much.
Oh, wow. So then you went on a spiritual journey. Was this before the pandemic, after the pandemic? When exactly did that happen?
Okay, so I moved down in November of 2019. The pandemic started in January of 2020. So it probably was right around the same time as the pandemic was starting. I wasn't intentional about this. I just found myself reading as many books as I could from various spiritual teachers, listening to podcasts. I couldn't get enough of the Oprah's Super Soul podcast with Eckhart Tolle. I mean, so much I would hear their voices in my head at the end of the night. And so then I think to answer your question, the pandemic was gaining traction and I was gaining information from spiritual teachers sort of right at the same time and just couldn't get enough of all of the books and the different podcasts from various teachers.
Yeah, and I love that. In fact, you give a whole list in your book of all the books, which I have read some of them. Some of them I had not read. I've ordered some of them.
Oh.
And I love it because I feel like you did so well by sharing so much. I mean, honestly, I feel like this is like my little summary of some of them. It
Oh.
was so good.
I
Go
I
ahead.
think that's what I was hoping for because I was reading various teachers. So I was reading Eckhart Tolle about the power of now. And then I was reading Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul, with observing the thoughts in our heads and just letting them subside. It's very hard to do, but I was hearing those thoughts now that I was all alone. And then I was reading about Buddha, and I was reading just various teachers. And so I thought, I wonder if there's a way to consolidate, although the messages all seemed in sync, but different language, but consolidate a lot of the messages into the book, which is, I guess, to some degree what I tried to do.
I feel like you did that very, very well. So
Oh,
let's tell everybody, like, you at first you didn't know what you were writing, but you ended up writing this wonderful book. It's published, it's out. The link will be in the podcast and in the show notes. So you have to get this book. But tell us a little bit. It's 52 Notes from the Soul, which is 52 weeks in the year, right?
Yep, exactly. So my idea at first was, once I had this book together with the different messages or mantras, and then I share my journey throughout each mantra or message, I visualized, oh, it'd be great to have like a sticky note on each chapter. And I pictured people putting sticky notes for the week in their cars, on their computers. And then I have a little music suggestion, which really there's no rhyme or reason to that, but just songs that I like, along with each message. And so I visualized that happening, but it didn't quite work out like that within the book world. Having never published a book or printed a book, I had no idea. So it's a message or a mantra a week for a year. And my hope is that hopefully the readers will find at least one mantra that touches them and that they can incorporate into their lives and start living their life according to that mantra. And that also it will bring peace to people reading it. Just the book will help others get to that sense of peace and feel that power of the divine love within us.
Oh, I love it. Okay. Well, so for me, I've been reading, I try to read a sticky note or a chapter a day. So right now I'm on 33. So I haven't done it every single day, but anyway. So, and then I try to put into practice something that you've said in there. But I guess there's been so many things that have come up for me. One is space, thinking about being space and then being silent and listening. You know, I talk about meditation all the time in my health coaching programs. And I'm always telling people, like, meditation can change your brain. It can rewire your brain. But a lot of people, including me, it's really hard to sit in that space. And so I don't practice it every day. But I've been practicing it more because you make it so relatable about how to just set your timer for 5 minutes. There's no judgment. Let the thoughts come in and go away, and, you know, just be open. And I'm getting more consistent. It's like I tell everybody, and again, in all my courses, it's the small things that we do consistently. We have to do these things consistently because it's a practice. We have to build that practice, right? And yesterday I was trying to sit in the stillness, and I had a lot of anxiety. I just couldn't sit in the stillness. So I decided that I needed to get out and walk in nature. And that helps me and really helped clear my space and be more in touch with God. And I know that your relationship with God is very, very strong too. And you talked about that too in the book, about how you would write these letters to God, which I've started doing that too.
Oh, I love that.
That's
awesome.
I love that you were doing that. And I journal sometimes, but I've been, again, more consistent, because when you read something that just really speaks to you, and this book has really spoken to me, and it goes back to this, that we are kindred spirits, Marcy. I just feel like
have goosebumps now.
I know. I mean, like, you've had such an impact on me through this book, and it just came at the right time. And I'm a big believer that things come at the right time. But you could take this book and just do one one sticky note, one
You're getting me like
chapter.
a little teary-eyed because
I love that.
it is,
But you
it's
can
so
take it
sweet.
and just do one a week, which I think would be great. With me, I think this is going to be something that it'll be something that I have forever and that I always kind of go back to. And I noticed it says volume 1. So
Right, motivated for
I'm
volume
thinking,
2.
yeah, I'm thinking there'll be more. And I sure hope so, because I do think this book, and there aren't many books that I pick up that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so good. And
Oh, thank you.
everything I read in there, I'm like, oh, this is good. This is so good, and really has had an impact. And that's
Oh,
why I
thank you.
want to make sure that as many people as we could get out there to know about this book. What do you think? Like, you've put it out in this world now.
Mm.
What do you think now? I mean,
Oh,
that was kind of hard to kind of put yourself out
right.
there,
Oh,
right?
yes, for sure. That's such a good question. Well, I mean, it's interesting. Here I write a lot in the book about how I was aware of my fears and anxieties and wrote letters to God and came up with some tools, simple tools to shift the fear to gratitude and love. And I write about that, and one would think, oh, great, she's there. No, it's a minute by minute effort. So the book gets launched. This is pretty funny. On early January, it was like a pre-launch.
Mhm.
And I'm just landing on a plane coming back from Copenhagen with my younger son and his girlfriend, and they're next to me. And I see the link to Amazon, and I try to like click it myself. This is the beginning of how I felt with this book out there. And I was just going to look at it myself, and they noticed, and they're like, "Is the book out?" I'm like, I think it is. So I showed them, and I started to get incredibly nervous. And I found myself not telling anyone. I mean, I hadn't told very many people I'd written the book. As we mentioned earlier, I was kind of like, well, I'm sort of writing a story. I mean, I said so little about it that my brother, who I'm really close with, was like, I thought you were just writing a book, tiny little book at the checkout of the grocery store, like little inspirational messages. So people start to realize you bought the book, my brother bought the book, those really close with me bought the book. And I sent it to my sons, my daughter-in-law, my son's girlfriend. And I don't hear much at all. Your texts come at incredibly important times. Because here I am, praying in the mornings, like, this book is out there. I want it to help other souls. It did come from a place of goodness and love. The world could use like a movement of the soul, but I don't know. I don't want to force it. Like, whatever's to be, it will be. And then I'd get like a little encouraging message from you. I've heard nothing from my family at all. And there were moments where I was like, I need to pull the book off Amazon. What have I done? And then your message would come in. So it's hard to be vulnerable.
It really is. And I really felt God pushing me to make sure to let you know.
Oh,
I really felt like those times that I sent you the text, because how many times do we think, oh, I should text her and tell her something, and then we just don't do it? Because I do that a lot. I'll think, oh, I should call her and check on her, or write my son a text and tell him how proud I am, or just something, but we
right.
don't listen. And because I believe that you helped me to listen more to those nudges from God, and he wanted me to say to you, Marcy, this is, I think you didn't do it by yourself, Marcy. I mean,
Yeah.
Marcy, God put this on your heart, and I think it will shift a lot of people's lives and help a lot of people.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that.
Mhm.
I feel that. I felt that it was coming from God, and it wasn't necessarily, it was coming from a place of goodness and love. But there were moments that I would get down on my knees and say, God, like, I don't know what you want me to do with this book, but just guide me to get it in the right hands. And then I'd flip and I'd be like, what have I done? Go through my fear base. And then I get a text from sweet Deanna. your book is encouraging me. And I was like, okay, keeping it out there.
Well, and I think that's the thing. I think that we need to remember a couple of things that no matter we can teach different things, but know that we're all on a journey. There's nobody that's perfect, right? And that we continue to be on this journey. I mean, I teach about how to eat right and move your body right and all that, but I don't do it perfectly. And I'm still on this journey and I'm learning. And even with this, I mean, I think we will continue to be on a journey. I don't think we ever arrive and go, oh, I got it. I'm
I don't
done.
think so. Right.
Like maybe that's when we go away. Maybe that's
Right.
when we
All
pass
right.
away. I don't know. But the other thing we need to remember is to encourage one another. I think that that's really important, and especially girlfriends and really those friendships. And I think it's hard as you get older to find like-minded women, find people that you can really connect with. And I feel like it's a blessing that I connected with you. And even though we don't live in the same place, we do get to spend time together. We can talk on the phone together. We can send texts and encourage each other. And I think that that's really important, that we need to do that for each other.
Oh, absolutely. It's a connection of the heart. Like I always feel like I'm connected with you. And I felt this from day one when we first met, that even though, as you said, we might not see each other every day, there's such a strong connection that's there. I'm super thankful I'm on this journey with you for sure.
Oh,
Because
I
you're
feel the
changing
same
so
way.
many lives in this
Oh,
world in such a good way. And
yeah.
that's what we hope and our dreams and wishes are for sure. It's just to touch others and help other souls for sure.
Well, I think that's it. I think that, that we change as we get older and we become empty nesters, and we always will be mothers, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
but that never goes away, but our role as mothers take on a different look. And so it gives us a new opportunities to do other things. And I believe as we get older, it's really important to share with the younger generation.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
I think that's so important.
I was just thinking that when you said to encourage others, other women, others on their journey, I was actually just thinking a lot of my son's friends or family members, younger females, trying to launch businesses, things of that matter. I'm aware of that now. And so I actually want to be encouraging and supportive and give them that positive feedback and encouragement to keep going on and keep on the journey. Because as you said, it's a constant journey and there are constant ups and downs and just part of being human. But if you have others who love you so much and are encouraging you on your journey, it just helps you get over those road bumps when you hit them.
So true. So true. Well, Marty, thank you again so much for joining me today on the podcast. Guys, don't forget, go order on Amazon. We'll have the link, Notes from the Soul, Volume 1, Marcella. Is that how you say is it Marcella?
Marcella, yes.
I'll call you Marcy,
always,
but I love
yes.
Marcella. That's beautiful. Marcella
Thank
Carroll.
you.
And so that Amazon's the best place to get it, right, Marcy?
Amazon's a good spot. Yes, Amazon,
Okay.
Barnes and Noble. I think it's available a lot of places
Okay.
online. So
Okay, great.
thank you so much,
Thank
Deanna.
you
My
so
kindred
much.
spirit.
Mwah.